Karen Burniston here with an assembly video for one of our die sets. This is die number 1144, the Holiday House, and you can check out all of our die designs at karenburniston.com. The Holiday House is an updated re-release of a die that I had during my licensing days. So it's essentially the exact same house, it's just been updated with a few additional pieces and features. There are 12 dies in the set, and for 8 of them, I've just gone ahead and cut them out of whatever pretty colors that I want to use on my house. Now these dies, I'm going to use the stencil and emboss features on them. So for these 3, I'm going to emboss them. All of the major die cutting machines have accessories to allow you to emboss a wafer thin die. So those accessories are either going to come with the machine or as an add-on. And what you'll want to do is just check with your machine's manufacturer, or maybe just check YouTube and find out what those accessory pieces are, and then what is the sandwich for embossing a wafer thin die. Now I'm using a Spellbinders Platinum 6. The embossing sandwich actually comes with the machine, so that's nice. But this is what's going to happen after I've embossed those pieces. It's going to give on the little house the brick pattern, the wavy lines on the roof, and then this little piece is actually 2 boards that can be used to board up the house when you're making an abandoned or a spooky house. So I just like to emboss first, especially when a die is brand new, because it's really easy to just set the die back into those grooves again and then change out the machine to a cutting sandwich and run it back through. I find that easier than cutting first and then having the paper fall out and having to put it back in the die for embossing. This one's going to cut the door frame and the door at the same time, and I'm actually going to run it through with 2 pieces of cardstock so that I can get an extra door, and that's what's used for the chimney. The embossing step and stenciling is completely optional. You can just skip embossing if you would just like to have solid pieces, or maybe you're using pattern paper. Okay, and then the little boards. I'm using a white gel pen through the stencil feature on the door that makes the doorknob. And I don't need a doorknob on the other door because that's actually going to be my chimney. And here is another completely optional step. But if you'd like to have a brick texture on your chimney, then you can actually use the house die just for the texture. So I'm just setting the chimney in somewhere on the brick texture and then running it back through with my embossing sandwich again. Once again, totally optional, just showing ideas here. The dies can also be used as a stencil, so that can be done with a pen or that can be done with a sponge and some ink, as you're seeing me do here. And then just make sure that if you're using ink with your dies as stencils, to go ahead and have a rag that you can wipe off that ink afterwards. You have that same option with the little house die to use the die as a stencil to add a highlighting color to the brick. So that's going to give you a crisp definition between the bricks, or if you want it to be more subtle, you can just brush ink across the embossed surface, as I'm doing here with the chimney. That makes it a little more subtle. I'm planning on making alternating gold and silver sparkle lights for my house. So I've cut the whole string out of gold, and then I put double-sided adhesive on the back of some silver glitter cardstock and then just cut half of the string. There are scalloped trim pieces for the roof of the house. So there's one for the big part of the house, there's one for the smaller part of the house, and then there is one for the top of the chimney. And all 3 of those pieces are on the same die for convenience. So you can definitely choose to use these pieces in different ways and definitely look to different combinations, especially if you were making a whole village. You might change where the little small house goes or where the doors or the windows are, so just have fun with it. But what I'm doing is using my Lineco Neutral pH adhesive in my fine tip bottle. We do sell both of those items on our website. And just gluing on the roof onto the main big house first. Okay, and then I'm going to use the largest of the roofline trim pieces just right over the seam. There is a little trim piece for the top of the chimney, so I'll put that on. And then the chimney itself is just going to glue right behind the house. The final roof trim piece goes on the little brick house, and then that little brick house goes onto the holiday house, kind of wherever you want it to go. And you can choose whether you want to have the edges flush or whether you want to have the brick house extend down a little bit from the edge. I kind of like it down, but it depends on the project. There's a die in the set to cut 2 solid rectangles and then 2 matching window frame pieces. So I usually do the solid rectangles out of yellow if I want it to look like the lights are on in the house. And then the finished windows can just glue to the house wherever you would like them. Since I doubled up my cardstock on the door frame and door die, then I actually have an extra door frame. So my thought was to glue that one on first, the one that's in the same color as the door itself, but then the other one over the top of it. And that way my door frame itself will have a little bit of dimension to it when I put the door kind of sunk down into the middle. There is a wreath in the set that looks great above the door and a heart in the set that looks great on the door. And then there's a piece in the set that makes the door mat, so just add a little glue to the top edge and then press the house to it so that it's coming out from the front door. And then to make my Christmas lights two-tone, I'm going to take the silver ones, which are stickers, and just cut out the individual lights and then press them to the gold piece every other light. The lights are sized so that that one strand will just fit perfectly across the upper roof line, but then you can also cut it into shorter pieces if you want to decorate other parts of the house. Not for this house, but if I was doing a spooky or abandoned house, I could use those little boards to board up the windows and the doors. Here's an example of a haunted house using those boards to board up the windows and the doors. And on the roof line, when I'm making a haunted house, I actually prefer to cut off the little scallops. It just gives it less of a whimsical look when you're trying to make something scary. So the holiday house itself is not a pop-up die. It's a decorator die that you could use on the fronts of cards or layouts. But of course, our pop-up dies would be the perfect way to animate the house. It fits perfectly on our fancy label accordion die, for example. It is also sized perfectly to swap out for the house in our house and fence pop-up. So here's a card by Kelly Booth where she's showing that you could use the holiday house instead of the house that comes included in the set. You could also mix and match the windows and accessories between the two sets. On this one, I added a window frame on the front of the door to kind of make it look like a paneled door. This Crooked Haunted House by Sandy Diller is so clever. Look at how she broke the window frames too. Lois Bach styled the holiday house as a gingerbread house, and then she mixed in the gingerbread cookies from our Winter Charms set. Another pretty card front by Lois Bach, this time with the holiday house set against our new Snowflakes pattern plate. And finally, this absolutely gorgeous rainbow of holiday houses across the front of a slimline card by Fran Sabad. The Holiday House die set is available on our website, as well as a lot of your favorite online and local retailers. Thanks for watching. If you click on the website link, you'll go to KarenBurniston.com, where you can find out information about purchasing these dies, as well as links to all my other social media accounts. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel and check out some of my other videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.